Hello YouTube, and welcome to this year's Halloween special. You guys really enjoyed my two stories last time, and therefore I decided to come back with more unexplained, weird encounters I've had in my past when I was younger with entities or forces that to this day I cannot explain. Let's see if you guys can help me make sense of these things. But if you're just there to be spooked, settle down, grab something to drink, and get ready. The first story happened around 2004. And I know the exact date because a very traumatic event started the entire affair. You see, when I was this age, my mom had a very cushy job, and with that job, she had some free travel opportunities. So we would get some pretty fancy holidays. And this one was supposed to be in Thailand. The issue is that not even a day before we were supposed to depart for Thailand, there was the worst tsunami in the history of the region that killed too many people to count, that completely ravaged the land. And it just so happened to be that the hotel we were supposed to reside in was the worst impacted hotel in the area where pretty much everyone in it died. The crazy thing being that we were supposed to be there because our flights got delayed a week. The corporation my mom worked for decided to push back the travel date a week because of business reasons. So essentially I was supposed to die there. And it's weird to think about because I've always had a relationship with water that has been based on conflict. Every time I'm near the sea or a great lake or a body of water, weird things happen to me, generally things that threaten my life, which is paradoxical to say the least because my name in a certain language means friend of the sea. So it's sort of ironical considering that one of my first memory ever was almost drowning. When I was 2, I was left unattended around a pool and I almost drowned. And ever since then, I have almost died a number of times in the water. Just a year ago, I was in Miami and I almost got carried into the deep sea by a riptide. And I only managed to escape because I'm a strong swimmer and I got lucky. My foot managed to catch a rock and I could push off of the rock to get myself out of the riptide. So every time I'm around water, especially the ocean, I am in danger. It is going to make a lot of sense as I go through with this story because the tsunami was supposed to claim my life. We got lucky. And after that, the company decided to completely change region. Of course, we're not going to go to Thailand. And instead, we went to the Caribbean. The Caribbean, for those who don't know, is a gorgeous region where water is pretty much land. There is water everywhere you look. And so I was, of course, going to get in trouble. But it didn't just stop at my life being threatened. It also threatened my very soul, and you're going to understand why. So we flew there. It was gorgeous. I had a good time. And a lot of the people who worked for the company also had kids. So I had a lot of companions, most of which were my age or younger. This is going to be important for later on. So we were playing, we would swim all the time, and the water in the Caribbean is not that dangerous. It's very clear and transparent. Yes, there are some sharks, but the beaches that the hotels own tend to be extremely safe. So nothing was going wrong at first. Then a certain trip happened, and that trip was a turtle seeing trip. So it's essentially a trip where you go and you follow a guide that is supposed to guide you towards turtles, sea turtles, and you get to see them as they swim, etc. So it's quite pretty. You can also do that with dolphins, with whales, etc. And so we go there. And when we get there, we don't see any turtles. Okay, I don't know if the guy was bad. We had a massive boat, so maybe it eluded the turtles. I don't know, I'm not a turtle expert. And essentially what happened is that a group of people, mostly adults, decided to get some gear together and they wanted to go explore and find the turtles, so go into the sea. And if you know anything about the sea, it's extremely tough to navigate, especially when you are a kid. But the issue is that I was extremely cocky back then, and I thought that I was the best swimmer on earth, so I thought I could hang with the adults. And usually my mom would have blocked me because my mom is what we call in French une mère juive, a Jewish mom. Doesn't mean that we're Jews, it just means that she's extremely protective. But for some reason on that day, maybe she had too many cocktails, she decided that it was fine for me to go. which was really dumb because I had no gear. All of the adults had palms, they had tubas, they had everything needed to be able to swim in the sea. I was by myself, shirtless, with just goggles on my face, and I was around 10 years old. So I don't know why, but every single adult collectively decided that it was fine, which is already weird enough. It felt like they were all brainwashed. But because I thought I knew better, I followed them. And the fucked up thing is that since no one was connected to me, none of these were my parents or anything, no one was going to become my guardian. They all wanted to see the turtles. So the second the group departed, they all left. No one was looking for me. And I just followed them. But if you know anything about swimming, if you don't have palms or gear, you're not going to be able to catch up to a group of people who have the gear, especially if you're a kid. So I was quickly left behind. And I swam and I swam and I swam, and it's the Caribbean. The sun hits you like a rock, and I was shirtless in the water. The water makes it even harder on your skin. And very soon I realized that I was in deep trouble because I was starting to lose my stroke. I was starting to have some difficulties actually floating, and I realized that I was very likely to drown. And I was 10. I only had swum in swimming pools or like the Atlantic Ocean where the water was at my waist. And I was left in the middle of the Indian Ocean. I couldn't see the bottom. There was nothing around me, no buoy or anything. And at this moment, I realized that I was going to die. And I say that with a smile on my face because I almost died in the water so many times that at this point, I'm just like, yeah, I'm an idiot. I know that one day the sea will claim my life because I'm way too cavalier around the sea, and anyone who knows the sea knows that this is what kills people. And on that day, I was doomed. I was going to die. So I thought to myself, okay, there's only one chance for me to survive, and that is making it back to the boat. So I turned around, and of course, the boat was much further than I thought because I swam way too far. And on top of that, there was an obstacle between me and the boat. You see, I was seeing some mist. There was mist in the water, like a pink mist that I didn't see when I actually swam that way, so I don't know where it came from. So I swam towards it tentatively, and upon closer inspection, I realized that these were jellyfish. But not just any jellyfish, they were baby jellyfish, which is why they appeared out of nowhere. These are pushed by the currents, so they appeared behind me. The problem being that even though they're babies, if you get stung by 1,000 of them because you don't have a shirt, you are going to get in trouble. You could even have a form of anaphylactic shock and die in the water. And I tried for 2 meters, and I realized, okay, I'm not going to be able to do it. This hurts way too much. So at this point, I was pretty much resigned to die because it was in the middle of me and the ship. So I had to go around, but this was a massive cloud of jellyfish, so it would make the journey much lengthier. I did not have the stamina for that. I was doomed. And then out of the corner of my eye, I saw something. You see, when we got into the water, before that, the guy that couldn't find the turtles, told us that we had to be very careful because there were sharks in the water. But these sharks didn't just swim in the open water. They lacked a certain spot, and that spot was a reef. A reef that created like a passage in between where the current would engulf itself. It would suck the fish, the small fish, and the shark would just wait at the bottom of the hole, and they would just eat the fish that would get sucked in. So it was very easy pickings for them. So he told us to avoid the reef. And this was the reef I was looking at. And in that moment, I didn't care about sharks. The only thing I knew is that if the reef was big enough, it could emerge out of the water and I could perch myself on it and survive. So I immediately swam towards the reef with my last bits of energy. And luckily for me, it was a massive wall that actually was on top of the water. So if I managed to climb on it, I would be able to be saved and to catch my breath and to potentially also alert the boat to have someone come get me before I drowned. So I did just that. I climbed up. I was completely numb. I had no energy. My body was frozen, even though the water was very warm. When you're in the water for a while, you have hypothermia, and this is usually what kills people. That's why they drown. So I was starting to feel the effect of the water on my body. So I had no feelings in my body whatsoever, and I climbed atop the reef. And I was petrified. I couldn't really move. So at first, I just caught my breath. I was reassured I was going to be fine, but I needed to catch the attention of the boat. So I started to signal towards the boat. The group of adults that were supposed to look and make sure that I wasn't going to die were completely gone. I don't know where these assholes were, but it was just me. And as I was signaling towards the boat, at some point the guide saw me on the reef because I wasn't that far off, and he took a smaller boat and he actually went and took it towards me to rescue me. So I was like, okay, I'm fine, I'm going to be fine. But the issue is that he couldn't get closer because the reef was much bigger than I thought. I actually got through a channel that was in the middle of the reef and that opened into the reef, but his boat couldn't get through it because the entry that I thought that I took was a secret, quote unquote, and it was small enough for my body to fit through. But it's something that I didn't realize when I was swimming because I was so tired. So essentially what the guy was gesturing towards me is, I can't get through. Of course, there were open passages of open sea, but he had to find them first and foremost. But the second thing that perplexed me a bit with his communication was that he kept pointing at me. He was gesturing as if to get me to look at my body, like he was doing this. And I was looking at myself and I didn't see anything. So I thought I was hurt or something, but I didn't feel any pain. And my body was perfectly fine. But he was really insistent. And he would point at me and then he would point at the reef. So I didn't understand what he was doing. And then I realized one thing. When I touched my body like this, and then I looked at my hands, they were covered in blue stuff. But at first, because I was so tired, I thought it was water. Then I realized it was contrasted with my skin. It wasn't water. And my goggles were making me think this was water because it tinted it blue. So I removed my goggles, and this is when I realized that I was covered in blood. You see, reefs are extremely sharp. I was so tired and numb I couldn't feel it, but I had dozens of scratches on my body and I was pouring blood. There was blood everywhere on me. It wasn't painful, but with seawater, it runs much faster. So I thought to myself, okay, he's trying to make me realize that I'm losing blood and I could eventually pass out. But I couldn't understand why he kept pointing at the water and the reef. And then it clicked. What was in the reef? What was underneath me at this very moment where I was perched on top of the thing? Sharks. And what do sharks like more than anything? Blood. My blood was seeping into the water and the sharks were starting to close in. This is why he was pointing around me. There were sharks all around my position, hundreds of them. And I was by myself on that small reef, 10 years old, with nothing to defend myself. The reef was above water, but barely. A shark could grab me. So this is when I realized I was actually in danger for the second time. And so what the guy was trying to get me to understand is that he was going to try to get as close to possible as me, but that he couldn't just get the boat onto the reef, so I had to actually join him. Meaning that I had to get into the water, blood everywhere on my body, and I had to swim towards him, and then he would grab me. And of course, I had no choice. I had to do it. On top of that, I was about to pass out from the sun. It's what we call en français une insolation. It's when the sun just knocks you out because your head, you get a headache, you're not well. So I knew I was on borrowed time because if I passed out on the reef, I was dead. So the guy got as close as possible to me and I just jumped. I didn't think about it. I didn't look to see if there was shark activity. I just jumped and I swam as fast as I could. My body was giving up on me. And the last thing I remember is touching the boat, feeling hands grab me, and just duck. I completely passed out at that moment. And I woke up on the big boat. So the guy actually managed to save me. No sharks bit me or anything. I was completely fine. And I woke up on that boat. My mom finally realized that she quote unquote fucked up. It wasn't really her fault, but she was, of course, very sad. She was in hysterics because her baby almost got devoured by sharks or drowned in the middle of the ocean. Can you imagine this? If people just come up to you and are like, yeah, your kid, we don't know where your kid is. And the other assholes that went for turtles came back without me. And when my mom was like, well, where is my kid? They were like, we don't know your kid. So she realized at this point that I might be dead. And she was very happy to see me alive. I was very unwell. I was passing out. I wanted to puke from the sun and the water, etc. So what they did is they put me on the side of the boat under a blanket and I was staring into the water. And I remember at this point, I wasn't even afraid for my life or anything. I was just very sad because I didn't get to see the turtles. It's as stupid as it was. And funnily enough, the other group also didn't get to see the turtles. They found absolutely nothing. So I was crying bitterly into the water. And this is when something that I think is almost mystical and paranormal happened. As I was crying into the water, desperate, a 10-year-old kid who just wanted to see turtles, a group of them emerged from the water. And it was a group of like 15, and they all emerged together. And they emerged at the very place and location where my tears were falling into the water, as if they could sense my sadness and they wanted to console me. And they sort of hung out around the boat just for me to be able to see them. And I started laughing, and instinctively I said, turtles. The group of adults that went to see the turtles popped up, and as they popped up, all of the turtles vanished, disappeared into the water again. I'm the only one who got to see turtles on that day. So that's sort of to explain to you what was happening at that moment in my life, my relationship with the sea. It's going to introduce other things that happened afterwards, because as I was very sad and desperate, a girl appeared. And it was a girl that I have no previous memory of. But she was apparently a part of the trip, and she was one of the kids. But she was older than me. And she approached me after that turtle incident, and she took care of me, right? She consoled me, she made me feel better and laugh. And this girl I ended up spending the rest of my journey with and the holiday with. She was 3 or 4 years older than me. She was around 15, 16. She was a beautiful blonde out of her dream. She was like an angel, just gorgeous. And she was very friendly with me. She actually spent most of her time with me, which was extremely strange because if you know girls, 16-year-old girls don't hang out with 10, 11-year-olds. It makes absolutely no sense. Especially when the kid in question has a big crush on the girl. I was absolutely crazy for her. And I think she could see it, and she, strangely enough, seemed to reciprocate, which again makes no sense. No 16-year-old is going to date a 10-year-old. And there was actually another guy in the group who was older than me. He was 14, 15, so around her age. And he was the stereotypical Chad. He had like a squirrel jaw, six-pack, he was gorgeous. At this age, I was a pudgy kid. I was very insecure with my body. This guy was perfect, and yet she completely ignored him, to the point that he would try to get at her, and she would shut him down every single time to spend time with me. This is also going to be important for the rest of the story. So we hung out together all the time, and one day, I remember, we were together at the beach, and we were swimming, and she lost her goggles. Now, it doesn't sound like much, but the island where we were had no shops. So if you lose your goggles, that's it. You don't have any extra pair, and now you can't see underneath the water, which is very sad because snorkeling is very nice, and you can see the fishes, etc. And so she was crying bitterly, and she was a very sensitive and emotional person. So I tried to console her. And because me being in love, or in love, when you're 10, can you really know love? I don't know, it's a different question, but I wanted absolutely to find her goggles because I thought to myself, okay, maybe if I find the goggles, she will give me a kiss. So I gave it my all. And as I told you, I was a very strong swimmer. So when I wasn't swimming in the strong sea and it was just the shallow sea, I could swim for hours. And so I went pretty far into the ocean to be able to find these goggles. And as you know, it's impossible. You lost your goggles in a wave, they're gone, you never find them. And yet, at some point, I was swimming way far, and I saw what looked like a pair of goggles very deep. Like it was feet to meters conversions are a bit weird, but maybe 30 feet below water, 20, 30 feet. And I was a pretty good diver, so what I did is I dove to see if it was her goggles, even though it made no sense. And when I got to it, what I saw is a body. There was a body in the water, and from afar I couldn't really see that it was a corpse because it was covered in moss and reefs and corals and things that had just used its essence to develop themselves. A wildlife, if you want. And there was fishes around eating the body, etc. And this was the body of a person with goggles on their head. And I don't know if it was a female or a male body, but all I know is that the goggles looked to be exactly the ones that my friend had. So what I did, it's a little bit fucked up, but I desecrated the corpse and I took the goggles off of their face. And I left and I brought them back to my friend. And I was like, are these yours? And she looked at them and she was like, yeah, but it's not possible because these are very old. And she was right. They look to be at least 10 years old in the sense that they were covered in debris. Clearly the time had passed. This was a very old pair of goggles, but it was the exact same brand that she had, which is weird because it was a brand new pair that she had and it was a brand new release by the brand. So we couldn't make sense of it, but this pair was not usable. So I just released it into the sea, which you're not supposed to do. You're supposed to take that type of garbage away from the sea, but I did that on that day. And as you will come to understand, it seemed to have triggered whatever guardian spirit of the sea there was, because a series of events that I can only describe as trickery ended up happening to me afterwards. Because on that very day, we left that beach, still with no goggles, and we went to a completely different beach. And on that completely different beach, it was one that was called Petite Anse, which is ironical because Petite Anse was the most dangerous beach in the region. People died there absolutely all the time. Grown adults that knew how to swim died because the currents were too strong. There were riptides everywhere and the waves were very treacherous. They would grab you off of your feet and drag you into the sea. So no one was swimming, save for one kid that thought he knew better, me. And I was swimming. I wasn't just putting my feet in the water. My entire body was in the water and my feet were not touching the bottom of the sea. So I was just moved around by the currents, but I was having a very good time. Don't ask me why. It's just whenever I enter the sea, my IQ is divided by 3, which is why I don't trust myself around the sea anymore, even though I love swimming. But on that very specific day, I was actually fine. I wasn't drawing or anything. And at some point, I was doing a breaststroke, and as I was doing the breaststroke, my hand touched something. And it was something rough, but also rubbery at the same time. And as I pulled it towards my face, I saw that it was a pair of goggles. The exact same pair of goggles that my friend had lost. So I was in a shock and a daze. I swam back towards her, and without saying a word, I extended my hand and I put the goggles in front of her face. And she looked just as shocked as I was. But before she could go and grab them, a massive wave came on the side and hit me and made me hit shit. And I just face planted straight into the sand, and both my hands were like this. And as I went like this, I released the goggles, quote unquote, for half a second. And then I closed my fingers again. And as I stood up, in my hand was something different than the goggles. In my hand was a human bone. It looked to be like a tibia or humerus, a leg bone. It was massive. It was the size of my face, and it appeared in my hand out of nowhere. And I looked at her, I looked at the bone, and as I look at the bone, another wave hits me, and I hit the sand again. Same thing happens. I open my hands, I close it again, stand up. This time I have a spoon in my hand. Perfectly preserved spoon, not damaged by seawater, shiny. Once again, look at her, look at the spoon, wave hits me, go down, grab something, stand up, the goggles are back. And at this moment, we run out of the water with the goggles. And these were her goggles, which is impossible. Statistically speaking, it is impossible. This beach was at the exact opposite side of the island as the other beach. It was the same day. What are the chances that her goggles were lost in the water, traveled all the way here around the island, and ended up in my hand? How is it possible? And if you're wondering right now, well, maybe it's not her goggles. Hers had a sign. Her mom put a sign on it so that she could differentiate it from the other goggles of the group, because we all had the same brand. So in that moment, we knew that it was hers, which again is the sign that something very weird was going on, because they appeared into my hand. Right? They weren't floating on the water. The water is crystal clear where we went. They appeared into my hand as I closed it. And then they changed form for some reason, but then they retook their original form. So, I mean, I was flabbergasted, but I was 10. I wasn't really questioning myself too much, and she didn't question it at all. She was very happy to get her goggles back. And it actually got me even closer to her, at which point she would spend all of her time with me. And it was a strike of luck, because the other kids in the group didn't really like me at all. But I never really understood why. I just knew that they would look at me from a distance and point and laugh as if I was strange or weird. I remember they would be in the pool, the swimming pool, and I would be the only kid to go to the sea, because I love the sea much more than the swimming pool. If you go to the islands of the Caribbean, why are you swimming in a swimming pool? Are you stupid? Go into the water. And I remember that her name, what I call her, Sigrid, the beautiful blonde chick, she would always leave them to be with me. So maybe that's why they resented me, because I would take her away. She was beloved by everyone. Everyone that talked to this chick loved her on sight. She was that perfect of a person. And this relationship with her evolved throughout the holidays. The time we spent with her was very precious to me. And eventually it came to an end. And I still remember that when it came to an end, we were together and we flew back in the plane and we were sitting next to each other. And she was hungry, so I stole from one of the little cabinets of the air pilot or the air hostesses, I stole some bread and butter and I would make little sandwiches and feed it to her, and she was very happy. And it's in that moment that we shared our first kiss, which was my first kiss. Which again, if you look at the age difference, is really weird. But I was so happy to be with someone that was able to love me for who I was and who wasn't making fun of me, that I was very happy in that moment. And so at the end, when we would go our separate ways, we promised to stay in contact. back in the days, there was no Facebook. Remember that there was no messages, no one had phones. But I knew that because she was a friend of my mom's worked with her mom, we would be able to come in contact again. So we go home, and a few days pass, and eventually I asked my mom, I'm like, hey, you know your friend? Yeah. Do you know her daughter's name? Do you know what school she goes to? Do you know her name, etc., etc.? And my mom looks at me, all a bit confused, and she's like, well, what friend are you talking about? Are you talking about her? I'm like, yeah, that's the woman with like the bob cut, like the black hair. She has a daughter, right? My mom's like, no, she has no daughter. So I'm confused. I said, no, yeah, elle a une fille. She has a daughter. I spent all of the holidays with me. She was, remember, she was tall, she was blonde. She had blue eyes. She was always with me. And my mom told me, no, you were alone most of the time. Like you were just by yourself. We just thought that you liked swimming by yourself. No one was there. She doesn't have a kid. She never had a kid. So I don't know who that person was. I don't know if she was a figment of my imagination. I don't know if she was a spirit summoned by whatever god that was there in the Caribbean that tried to look after me after I almost died in the water. The memories are real for me. I still remember her to this day, and the name I give her is Sigrid, because to me that's what her name was, but I can't remember her name. That's the crazy part. We spent all of our time together, and I cannot remember her name. And very recently, I checked the pictures of that trip, and she's nowhere to be seen. That 15-year-old kid with the six-pack was there. All of the other kids that didn't like me were there, but she's the one part that is not there. So I don't know what happened. I don't know again if maybe I entered a parallel universe. Maybe I died in these waters, devoured by sharks, and I entered a universe where my body didn't actually die. I was the survival. It was the survival universe, and the girl was in that universe. And then when we took the plane, I went back to my real universe. I have absolutely no idea. And to this day, the worst part is that my mom also has absolutely no recollection of everything that happened to me. So the thing with the sharks, the thing with the goggles, apparently I never told her or she wasn't aware of it. So I don't know what happened on that day, but this was my first story, the story in the Caribbean. Now to the next story, which is also connected with water, because as I told you at the start of this one, my name means friend of the sea, but I almost drowned when I was a kid, and the place where I drowned is the place where this second story happened. A story even more mysterious. There is less charm in it because it's much more spooky. There's no imaginary girlfriends involved. Instead, we're going to talk about magic, because even though there was magic in the first one, maybe again essential magic, magic of the land, this one is a much darker kind of magic. I told you last year in my two stories, you can find a description if you want, that the place where my ancestors reside to this day is known as the land of witches. It is believed that there is witchcraft going on, and that some people practice dark magic and dark rituals. And when I was younger, I came in contact with such rituals, or at least I think. So the place is the place where I almost drowned. This is where the story happens, and it was a campsite. It was a campsite for kids, so it was a very enclosed environment where 30 to 60 kids every single year would be sent by their parents so that they could spend some time on the countryside, see nature, etc. And they had to pay, of course. And it was a beautiful sight. They had a swimming pool, they had a climbing wall, they had basketball camps, etc., etc. And the swimming pool in particular is where I almost drowned, because when no one was there, you could access it if you knew the people who ran it, or if you were a scoundrel like my family is, you can find a way in to enjoy the pool. So it's what we did. People left me unattended. I almost died. The spooky thing about it is that the depth of the pool is exactly 6 feet. And to this day, it's my height. I am exactly 6 feet. So it's strange to see that the place where I almost lost my life as a 2-year-old ended up being the exact height I would reach as an adult. But there is more to this place than just the pool. It was a very mysterious area because no one could access it. If you were not part of the camp, you couldn't enter it. And no one really knew the people that ran the camp. which is weird because this is a part of the world where people are very tight-knit. It's a tight-knit community. But we never could make friends with these people because they were never seen outside of the camp. It's as if they never left the camp. And on top of that, they had a road that would go by the camp, and when we would drive it to go to another swimming pool, we would see that the kids barely did anything. I mean, they never used the basketball court, they never used the climbing wall, they never used the pool. We never saw kids in the pool. It's as if they were just in their tents or in groups outside doing nothing, no activities. And these kids always looked very sad. Every time we would see them, their faces were droopy. They looked like they were bored out of their mind or almost passed out, standing up on their feet. It was a weird environment, and we didn't really like driving by it, especially at night. At night, there was a dark atmosphere going on. But for some reason, unexpectedly at one point, the camp just emptied itself out, meaning that everyone left. And to this day, again, we don't know why, because my family tried to, of course, get nosy and understand what was going on, and we couldn't get an explanation. It was as if people just vanished. One day they were there, one day they weren't, and the camp was just abandoned. So, me being curious, I wanted to see what was going on. I drove by that place one day, and I was looking for a spot to enter because they had massive, like 15, 20-foot fences with barbed wire. I don't know why you would even need that, maybe to prevent the kids from leaving, but that doesn't really make sense. Is it really needed? So I couldn't get in. They had fences, they had the door to enter, had spikes on top, and you couldn't open it. It looked like a prison, to be honest with you. Not the place I would send my kids. But after looking around the perimeters of the camp, I realized that there was a hole in one of the fences. Maybe a hole that was made by some of the kids to escape at night to go smoke, I don't know. But it was big enough for me. So what I did is I took my bike, I hid it in the underbrush to make sure that no one could see it from the road, and then I entered the camp. And it was a pretty regular camp at first glance. It was very fancy, lots of good equipment, it seemed to me, and there was no one. And the thing that shocked me and the thing that gave it an eerie atmosphere is that it really looked as if people just dropped what they were doing and ran, because there was dishes in the grass as if someone was eating and left with food still left in it. The tents were still there. Some clothes on the lines to be able to dry the clothes in the sun were still there. So it's as if they all disappeared in thin air. So I explored the camp and I looked at all of the things I only saw from outside. So I was able to look at the pool, and the pool was it wasn't empty. There was clear water in it. It was perfectly clean. There was a basketball court. The basketball court was a little bit strange because it had 13 baskets, exactly 13 baskets. They were placed in a shape that I'm going to describe later, but it was not the normal shape of one here, and then one on each side to be able to play one-on-one or to play matches. It was clearly a geometrical shape created on purpose. And on top of that, they were all 13 feet tall. If you've played basketball, we play on regulation hoops. It's 10 feet tall. 12 is already immense. 13, you can't play on a 13 hoop. You can't even do a layup. It's not usable. So what genius had decided to get that type of spec for hoops? These were clearly made on purpose for that place. They were very thick rims too. They had symbols on it. They looked like they were stylized, but I had never seen basketball hoops like this in my life. These were clearly very expensive. And why 13 of them? Why would you need 13 of basketball hoops? You have 30 kids. Are you going to make 15 teams? The court made no sense. And I attempted to play. I actually had a basketball with me because I was going to go train in a different court. It was not usable. You couldn't play basketball on these. So what I did afterwards is I climbed up the climbing wall. And this was the baby climbing wall. Every single handle was placed so close to one another that it was impossible not to be able to climb up. And it wasn't that tall. It was like maybe 35, 40 feet tall. I knew I had risked absolutely nothing. So I climbed up, and it gave me a peripheral view of everything. And from the top, I could see the basketball court, and the basketball court was placed like this. So there was one basket here, two baskets here, two here, two here, two here, two here. It was like a star, but it was a star it wasn't just one with 5 points. There was 5 points, and there was like a perimeter around it. So it almost looked like a pentacle to me from a top, but it was in a rectangular shape. So something like this. So more like a diamond. It wasn't really round. So it was extremely weird. And as I surveyed the scene, I also realized that there was a car that was coming my way. And it was a white van. And I knew for a fact that almost no one took that road, so I had to get down as soon as possible. It was still very far off in the distance, and these roads, you can only navigate them at 20 miles an hour because they're very bendy. So I got down, got near the hole, and sure enough, the van actually parked into the entry of the camp. And as they did, I got onto my back, and when they got into the camp, they were out of sight. I left, so they never actually saw me, or so I thought, because I didn't have enough time to explore the entire camp, so I wanted to come back. And I did a few days later. And when I did come back, things were entirely changed. The hole was still there, but it looked as if the camp had aged. It looked as if years had passed, because the grass that was this big when I first visited was now at my waist. It looked like years of growth. And things around were destroyed. Everything that I saw that was in perfect condition the first time I went was completely shattered. The swimming pool was black. It was like tar in the water, like someone had dumped detritus until it couldn't really look like water anymore. The basketball court was destroyed. It was like vandalized. They had destroyed the hoop, they had set fire on some of the hoops, it was melted. There was graffitis, what looked like graffitis on the climbing wall. All things that were clearly the work of someone who was trying to destroy the camp as much as possible. Another thing that I found very weird was that the fact that all of the doors were removed. So all of the doors of the camp were removed, like they were taken out of their hinges, which if you're going to steal valuables, why would you take the doors? It makes no sense. But the issue with this is that now I was very vulnerable because every single building was open. And it was creepy as fuck, because as I looked around, all of the windows were staring at me, all of the doors were black, and it looked like as if someone could be standing there looking at me. And so I didn't really feel like I was safe or secure in that instant, but I still wanted to explore. So what I did is I went around the camp, and I walked behind the buildings so as to have something to protect me. But as I walked behind the buildings, looking up like this, I could see all of the windows that were just at my head level, and I was afraid that something was going to grab me or someone was going to look at me from one of these. So as I was doing that, I was very, very careful. I ran into a place with masking tape. I don't know if it's the name that you guys use in English. It's the tape that you put when there is a body that drops from a building, like it's police tape. And it was around trees. And again, it was placed in a weird shape. It was placed as if it was supposed to represent a symbol. And in the middle was dirt that clearly had been dug. So someone had dug something and there was something buried there. This is my first instinct. This is what I thought. So I sort of looked at the scene. I was trying to figure out what was going on. And as I was doing that, on my side, this way was the basketball field, and there was the swimming pool right there on that side. And at the top of the swimming pool, there was a building, and the building had all of these doors and the things removed. And I don't know what this building was for, because all of the other ones I could sort of guess. There was like a cantina, there was a place to put equipment, but this one intrigued me immediately. And so what I did is that I attempted to explore that building because it looked to me like it was interesting, and I also saw that it was too small to be just anything innocent. My instinct told me that this was a building that went underneath. There was something underneath. But as I was making my way towards it, in a flash, in an instant, a man emerged from the building. And a second he wasn't there, a second, and then he was there. And this was a burly man. He was wearing all white. And the thing that marked me when I saw him was that he had a mask on his face. It was something I've never seen before. It was like a surgical mask. So it was underneath his nose. I could sort of see some of his nose, but it was covered. And it was a square like this. But it wasn't tissue or anything. It wasn't moving in the wind. It looked like a hard rectangle that was hiding his mouth. And that's what he was wearing. And he had a hood, he had a white hood, and I couldn't see his eyes. And he spotted me immediately. Like his eyes were immediately on me. And the second I saw that, I turned and I bolted. And as I told you, I was behind the buildings. So essentially what was happening is that he was there, I was there, my bike was there, so we were equidistant with the bike. So if he knew where my bike was, this was a race. And I was running behind the building, and as I was running, I could feel, I'm not sure this happened, but I could feel hands just trying to grasp me from the windows that were open on my side of the building. I felt things flicker past my ear. I ran like I never ran before, jumped. I wasn't even checking if the guy was there. I jumped through the hole, got on my bike, and biked out of there. And as I was biking out, I turned my head, and the guy was standing there. He was on the road, standing there, and he was just looking at me. He wasn't pursuing me or anything, he was just staring at me. At which point, you would think to yourself, okay, well, that's a very nice story, thank you, NH, you never went back. Well, I'm an idiot. So of course I went back, because I wanted to know what was in that building, I wanted to understand what was going on, and I wanted to know why the tape, why was there tape? So I waited, and the next time, because I'm a genius, I went at night, because all of these occurrences happened in broad daylight, and I thought to myself, well, surely no one is going to be there at night. So at night, I approach, the camp is as creepy as ever, I get in, the grass is tall, the doors are removed, things are shattered everywhere again, vandalized everywhere. I go around the building, I approach the place where there is tape, and there's no tape left, just a massive hole in the ground. As if the people or the guy who was there saw that I saw it, and he saw fit to remove whatever was left there. Another thing that I realized afterwards was also the fact that if the guy was in the building, it meant that he was there all along, as I was also there. And maybe he wasn't by himself. Maybe he had colleagues, he had people with him. So this is gone. The basketball court is destroyed, and as I approach the pool, I realize that there are things in the pool. It's not just dirty, it's not just dirty water. It looks like dirty water because a massive amount of things were dumped. And as I look closely, I see what looks like a head in the water. And as I approach, I realize it is a head, but it's not a human head. It's a deer's head. It's a deer's head that's been severed with what looks like a crown on its head. I'm not sure if it was a deer or a goat. I was so afraid in the dark of seeing that I couldn't really pinpoint what type of animal it was, but it was in the middle, and it had a look on its face of just pure horror. I didn't know animals could look like this, but it looked like it had suffered. So upon seeing that, I completely renounced getting into that place, that building that I was now very close to, and I could see that it had stairs. Going down, it had stairs. So it was something going into a basement somewhere. I don't know why, I don't know where. I just turned and I left. And I never went back to that camp. And that camp, interestingly enough, reopened a few years afterwards, and we came to know why it was closed in the first place. It's because a number of kids reported some degree or another of abuse, and at some point a kid also died in the camp. This is why they had to close. There was an investigation, and they decided to just close the camp for a few years. It was closed for 3 years, then it was bought again by a different company, and they started running it again. I don't know exactly what was going on with the kids there. It did look to me like there were some rituals. I don't know if the kids participated. I don't know the degree of atrocities that they put the kids through. All I know is this. That guy with the mask was not there to steal valuables. I'm 100% positive on this. I think that these were people who were trying to hide evidence. I think that these were people who came afterwards, when the camp was closed, to hide things that they knew would incriminate them, and then they left with it. And this is, I think, why the guy never pursued me. It's because he realized I didn't really see anything, I didn't take anything with me, because I think, and this is why I felt so creeped out the second time I went into it, that they were actually looking at me the entire time. And I think that they saw me the first time. I think the first time I went, the white van saw me, and they removed all of the windows and doors to be able to survey the area, and when I came back, they were looking at me the entire time. And this is why they removed whatever was in that hole. I don't know if there was a corpse in that hole, I have no idea. But from what I understand, This followed a series of criminal activity in the region. That's what my family told me. And after that, the camp ran smoothly and nothing similar ever really happened. So that was that for my 3 stories. Hopefully I didn't forget anything. I hope that you guys had a good time getting spooked. If you have an explanation, if you have a hypothesis for what happened to me the first or second time, I'm willing to listen to any explanation. I hope that you're going to have a very good Halloween, and I will see you